today's video is about how I made this card. So I've used Spellbinders Season's Greetings Evergreens. It's a press plate rather than a glimmer plate. The great thing with press plates is that they are more finely detailed than glimmer plates generally are, and that's achieved because the etching of the pattern is at different levels, so that the fine lines are not as deep, and the larger areas are etched more deeply. So it's a clever way of doing things, but they can be used for foiling just the same as glimmer plates. Okay, so that's what we're using, and I'm going to be covering how I got the gap in the middle, yeah, and how we can batch foil this, so we can make a whole series of cards. Because this was the last of these I made, but I did a batch, and this was one of the others, and this was one of the first things I foiled, and my inking went a bit wrong up here, but I've kept it to kind of act as a template to help me position my foil stamp and my stag on subsequent cards. Okay, so sometimes it's worth keeping something that goes a bit wrong to help you with the next things you make. Okay, so I did that. I used like a dark turquoise foil on this one. This is one I did, and this is what I'm going to work on today, using a really dark blue foil. Okay, and I've moved the trees down a bit on this and made the card a little bit bigger. Okay, I'll also do a follow-up video on how to actually make a frame. Okay, so for this, basically you foil that, but then you cut a frame out of it and remount it with the inner piece covering the join. Okay, so I will be covering that as well, but I'll do it as a separate video because that's quite long. Well, not complicated, but there's some things you really need to know about how to get things lined up in that, and it would make it a very long video. So in this one I'll cover the foiling and the colouring. Okay, so the other thing I did, because, and it shows up best on this one, if I come in close, there we go. So this foil stamp is designed so that the areas not foiled look like snow on the branches, and the foil bits are like the shadow and the darker parts of the tree. Okay, so in order to be able to do that, I need to be able to, when I do my inking, mask off the trees. So I foiled the whole foiling plate, and then I've very carefully fussy cut around the trees. Okay, this is just on a piece of it's about 200 GSM card, so it's quite sturdy, and I don't stick it down because that would damage the foil. I just kind of tape down the edge and hold it in place as I'm inking. Okay, so you'll need to do that, and as I say, it's literally just patiently fussy cutting it. Okay, if you've really got the patience, you might want to do two, because that makes the inking part of it easier, but I just move this one around as I need it. Okay, the other thing I need is a curve, but we'll come to that when we've done the foiling. So the other thing I've got a stag foiling plate, okay, which I was lucky enough to find, and I need my glimmer, and I'm just going to make sure it doesn't switch off on me because it's been sitting there hot for a while. I'm just going to pull it out, put it back in, and then it'll stay warm. Okay, so my original card, I had the trees a bit higher, but I've also made my card a little bit bigger, so I'm probably gonna kind of do a bit of a cross between the two. So I can use this as a guide to position, but actually you're going to be using a completely blank piece of card, so you're just going to have to think about where you want your trees. So how I position my foil stamps is I use a magnet. Sort of magnet you use with your stamping press to firmly hold my foil plate in place on my card. So I want to go a bit further in, and the magnet is that strong I can't actually move the foil plate, so let's just go a bit further in. And I think I wanted to go a little bit further up than I did on this, so maybe about there. Okay, so the trees on the left of the card, the trees on this side, are actually higher than the trees on that side, and that kind of plays a trick of the eye to give you more depth in the scene. Okay, so I want this side a bit higher. So if I look at what I've done here, it's quite difficult to, I think I need to go out a bit more. I think I've come too far over. As I say, once you've got decided where you're going to put things, it's much easier. I need to come down a bit. Look at it compared with this one. There's that. Yeah, I've got a long way over. Right, I'm going to go for that. Okay, so that is held in place with my magnet. I also need quite a big piece of lowish tack tape. Now I use a good quality masking tape. It's sort of professional decorator's tape. And it's called frog tape for delicate surfaces. So it's designed so that, you know, painters and decorators can mask off an area, and when they take the tape off, it's not going to pull other paintwork off. So I'm going to stick that to my card. I'm not sure where yet actually, so I'm going to pop that where I can reach it, and then I'm going to turn the camera so you can see my glimmer. Yeah, I think that's quite a good view. So I can pick this up. I say it's not going to move. Now it's important that all of the foiling plate is on the hot plate, not over the edges, but my card doesn't have to be. So my card can go there, and I'm going to put it up against the edge of the grey bit there, and then I'm going to use my piece of tape and I'm going to stick it down. Okay, because this plastic edge is cool and that's not going to matter at all. And then to help me when I do another one, I'm going to use a fine line Sharpie, and I'm going to just draw around this corner of the card. I'm going to put a number 1 against it. And I end up with quite a few marks on my glimmer, and then every so often I clean them all off. So that's put down there. I can take the magnet off now. My card's not going to move. And then I'm just going to flip my card out the way. So I've made a hinge here and set that warming up. Okay. Now I've got a selection of foils here. I've got some, oh, let's turn the camera back round. So I've got a selection of foils. I've got this dark blue, I've got some matte rose gold, and then I've got the Spellbinders shiny rose gold. Okay, so it shows up well on the camera, so I'm going to use the blue first. I've also got some silver and some turquoise. find the best thing for cutting foil is some large scissors. And I'm going to cut this in half. That should be about the right amount of foil. Okay, so coming back over here. So I've got a piece of foil. That piece has got some damage on it, so I'll use the other piece. Okay, so I'm putting my foil just on this end, and it only needs to go as far as the edge of the card. It's best to leave it sticking out a little bit, and then because it's sticking out and I don't want to get foil on my plates, piece of copy paper, just a piece of thin paper, and then my two top plates. My time light is on, so I'm ready to go. So don't hold down this end because it makes it hard to get the platform out. Your card isn't going to move because you've got it taped down. Okay, I can lift up my card, and there's my foiling. So I did mention that I've made a batch of these, so to make this quicker I am going to use this really lovely Glimmer rose gold foil and do another one. So I'm just going to peel my tape off the back of the card carefully. There we are. Right. So I'm leaving my foiling plate in place. I've not used this before, so done up. We are going to do the other end of the trees in a minute. But for now, I'm going to take another piece of card the same size. And I'm going to position that, I know I haven't put my foil on yet, in the same place as the other, using this mark I put in the bottom corner. And in a minute, I will take the platform out and show you that mark. Okay, so I'm going to flip that out the way, add my foil, copy paper, and my two plates. Now you may have noticed I go forwards and backwards. It is because I haven't got enough space behind here for to be grabbing plates as they go all the way through. So there we are, and that's forward nicely. So I've done two, I could do a third. I think I like that colour again, so I'm going to do another one in those. Another piece of card lined up with my mark and the edge of the grey. That's moved. There we go. Oh, I've already folded that piece of card. Oh, that was a blank I picked up. That's a blank piece of card. Okay, so they've got 3 of the left hand side foiled. So, get my pick up tool. I'm now going to take this off so it needs to cool down. Right, so scissors away. I'll need the foil again in a minute. So that made it fairly quick. To do 3 pieces for the left hand side. So I'm making Christmas cards. I tend to make several that are the same or slight variations, you know, different colours, slight variations. So now, when my foiling plate has cooled down, I need to figure out where the other side is going. So I also am going to need my stack. So if you're using a die cut, have one die cut ready so that you can figure out where you're going to put it. And my curve, my slope kind of starts level with them, and then the others come kind of in front of it. So you just need to think about where you're positioning things. Quite like stamping, but with foil. So I always think when I first started foiling, I think people made lots of analogies to die cutting, but it's much more like stamping. Particularly when you're figuring out what it is you want to do. So I think I want that about there. Yeah. So again, I can put a magnet on the back, hold that in place, and then just get my stag and think, right, if he's standing in the midst of those trees, where do I want them? That's maybe a bit low. I'm going to go up a bit. I think that will be better. If they're too low, they're going to look out of place. Yeah, so I think, let me get another magnet. So I just put a magnet on the back of the stag as well. So I think I'm going to end up with that kind of a scene. Yeah. Maybe a little bit higher. Yeah. Make sure they're level. Don't want wonky trees. Okay, so the stag I can put to one side for now. That gets foiled after we've done the inking. Okay, and then I need to put this back onto the Glimmer to heat it up again in its new position. And you can't just turn the card round to do either side, because your trees would end up upside down on one side. So let's bring this round again. So line the card up with the edge and line that up. So this has come out so that my corner's not quite the same. I've got a little mark further down that works for this. So as I say, I'll show the marks in a little while. So I'm just going to take that to the edge, take my magnet off and set my timer. While that's warming up, I'm cutting my foil. Okay, while that's finishing warming up, I'm going to put my foil down, my card up. Probably by the time I've got my plates in place ready. Yep, the light's just come on. So remember, don't hold at the front, just gently at the back. Pull it out. I push with my fingers as I pull with my thumb. Okay, so that's the first one done. Take the tape off the back so I can get the next one. Make sure I've got it the right way round. Yep, make sure that all the trees are facing the right way. So, yeah, that's fine. So that way round, up against there, down there. Carefully your fingers on the hot parts. That's two done already. And I'm just going to cut a new piece of foil for the blue one. So the blue one. Again, making sure, so trees are pointing to my right. So I need trees pointing to my right as I put the card down. And then I'm going to be foiling on that end. Okay. Yep. Sorry about that. Okay, so let's see what we've got and have a bit of a tidy. Some scrap foil. So I have got, oh, take that one off. Sorry, I'm just fighting with magnets here. I'm just going to take the plate off and let it cool. Oh, that's the blue one. Right. So, I've got here a selection of my foil pieces, and they're all exactly the same. Other than the colour, of course. Okay. So, now I can think about putting in the background, which is supposed to be sort of a stormy sky with a sunrise, okay, or sunset. Anyway, that's why there's the yellow behind the stag. So I'm going to use the blue one because I haven't quite figured out the colour scheme I'm going to do with that one, and I need to do the inking before I do the stag, because it's like a solid area of foiling. What I found with the first one I did was that the ink, when I was doing like the snow and the various bits, got onto the foil, and when I wiped it off, the quality of the foiling wasn't quite as it was when the foiling first went down. So for that reason, I'm inking before I carry on and do for the stag. Okay, so let me just move my foils out of the way a minute. While I'm there, let me just grab a hot plate. Now it's hot, so I'm going to have to be careful here. So I said I would show you the markings. So let me zoom the camera in. Right, so I used a fine line Sharpie, and I just put a mark down in the bottom corner here. I drew around the corner of the card, and I already had a mark further down that I used when I did the second trees, the trees on the right. Okay, so fine line Sharpie I find is the best for this, and a little bit of hand sanitizer on a cloth will clean it off again. So if you want to end up with lots of marks and you're getting confused, you can clean them off and put some new ones on when you're ready. Okay, doesn't do any harm to the plastic. Okay, it's only on this area that stays cold. There's no problem with that. Okay, so for this I'm just using some blending inks. Whatever your favourite inks are, use those. And I like to rest on this watercolour mat. It holds the card nice and still for me, and I've got places to put my inks. Okay, so let's zoom the camera back in. Right, let me try and get the camera in a good spot so that you can see what I'm doing with the inking. Right, I think that will be probably the best I can do. Yeah, probably about there. Okay, and I might have a bit more light, so bear with me. That's better. Yeah, that's better. So I'm using blending brushes. Again, it's entirely up to you, whatever tools you like to use. And I'm using Rusty Hinge Distress Ink. And then I've got a greyish purple that I'm going to use for the sky. Okay, but I don't want to get ink over my trees. That's very important. And I need to keep my snow nice and pristine here in the background. So I need to put a mask on to give me my kind of slope down. And I want it to come from sort of there up to there. So it doesn't matter that my curve isn't exactly the right shape. It's a bit of a curve, and as long as it goes between the trees, that's fine. Okay, so get that where you want it first, and then I'm just going to use some more pieces of tape and just take that down at the bottom. And then I need my mask for the trees. As well, so I'm going to slip that underneath there, put it down on the trees, and then I'm going to tape one mask to the other so that my foiling is protected. Okay, doesn't need lots of tape. I'm going to hold bits of it down with my fingers as I go. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is the sort of sunrise in the centre. So I don't want really heavy inking. I want it to be really subtle. So I'm going to get some ink on my brush and I'm going to work it on my mat, or you might want to use some scrap card, and just make sure it's really soft, and then just sweep upwards from the mask. And you can always put more on. Very difficult to take any off. And I'm staying away from this side at the moment, just doing the one side and the centre. And I always think you don't really think you've done very much until you can actually lift up the mask and see. A bit more in the centre and at the bottom. That's it. And then I need to move my mask so I can do the other side, which is why I said you might want to make two. and then I can do this side. Okay, so that's that done. As I say, doesn't look a lot until you take all the masks and things away. And then I need to start putting the sky in. So while I've got the mask on this side, I'm going to do this side. Again, pick up some ink, and this is quite a juicy ink pad I've got here. And it's quite a muted colour, but I don't want it to be too heavy, so I'm going to work it really well. Almost take most of it off my brush by the time I get started, and then come in from the edge of my card and down in amongst my trees. I'm using a bigger brush because you get a softer effect. Yeah, so that's that side done. And this side. This is going to be cut down, so don't worry if you get some heavy inking sort of at the edge of your card. It'll never be seen. So there, when I take that mask away, let the camera up a bit, lean back out. So that's what you end up with, okay? Now, the trick with the snow is that snow is not completely flat. You need to create an illusion that there's sort of depth in the scene. So, what you do is you take your curve and, oh, just, sorry, I need some scrap paper. So I'm going to clean off my brush and that brush, just on some scrap paper. Now I've got some kitchen paper. Or use another brush. Right, and then I want to take a little bit of the grey. Zoom the camera back in again. And this over here where you can see it properly. Zoomed in too far. Right, and then what you do is you take your curve and you just kind of create little shadows in the snow along its edge. and you can barely see what you're doing until you actually pick it up. Important to be really kind of gentle with what you're doing. Just in various places. Put some shadows in the snow as it sort of undulates with the landscape. And I'm using the same colours I use for the sky. I'm being very light with it. And you might want to turn your curve over and do some sort of going the other way. So I'm not using the whole thing. I need a little bit more ink. I'm barely using any pressure. Let's put sort of lumps and bumps and shapes into the snow. I'll pick this up in a minute and show you close up. Sure how well that's showing. I'm going to zoom right in. So hopefully you can see there's just some very faint marks in my snow. See if that makes it any better. No, not really. Yeah. So it just gives that illusion that it's a landscape. So that's that bit done, and then I'm going to use my heat tool to dry this. I'm not going to make you watch that. I'm going to pause the video while I do that. Okay, so camera out. So I've got my piece, my trees and my landscape. Okay, now I'm going to foil my stag. You might be using a die cut, either in black or silver if you've got a stag die, or putting something else completely in the centre there. But I'm going to foil my stag. Now, as I say, it's, you know, it's a flat area, so dies with flat areas need a bit more pressure than other dies, other foil stamps. Okay, it's like when you're die cutting a very intricate die, because you've got lots of cut lines very close together, the pressure gets spread out across all those cut points, and this is like having an infinite number of cut points all together that the pressure gets spread out over. So I'm going to be using some shims. Also, this is a thinner than standard foiling plate. It's not as thick as the as normal foiling plates or press plates. Okay, it's about the thickness of a piece of card thinner. Okay, it's the same thickness as a normal die, in fact. So to position this, and again, if I'd done all the inking on my others, we could do this as a batch, so keep that in mind. So I'm going to put my stag about there. I can put the magnet on and then show you where I've put it, because I can hold it up. So I put him there. Okay, so that's where he's going to go. I've got a roll of silver foil, but actually before I cut some foil, and then I do want to trim the foil quite well before I put it down. So having said I'm going to put him there, I'm going to pick him up again, and I'm going to put him on my foil and trim around him. so I, as much as possible, reduce the risk of getting over foiling.
The shed is hot. Consider opening the shed door.
Okay, so that's my piece of foil. And then I can put my stag back down. I think I've pretty much got him in the same place. So there's my stag, and then I can put my card onto the Glimmer. So I'm going to use my piece of tape again. So I'm going to position it on the back of the card before I put this down. That just helps keep my fingers away from the heat. So I'm going to put my piece of card down on here. Now if I've got some marks, I can line up with them. Or I can line up with one of the grey edges. Okay, so I'm going to put my tape down, put my card down, take the magnet off. Then I'm going to flip the card back out the way and put my timer on. Okay, so the reason I flipped the card out the way is because I want to heat the foil stamp, but I don't want to heat the card. Also, I'm going to need card shims. So I've got a piece of card to use as a shim here. It's a piece of A4 card folded in half. It would have been 250 GSM card that's been folded and used lots of times. It's quite compressed. So I'm going to put that in between the green plate and the top plate. Okay. My foil stamp is now hot. I can put my foil down, flip the card down, put my plates on. Gently hold at the back and ease it out. The card's not going to move because it is taped in place. I'm going to run very slowly through my die cutting machine. I just feel I come to the edge of the foiling plate there. Go back. Over the body, I'm going to go back and forwards a couple of times. And hopefully I've got nice solid foiling. Yep. I'm going to take the foil plate off. Now if I was doing a batch, I could leave it on and do lots. Let me turn the camera back around here. Oh, I've got you crooked. Okay, so I'm going to just take the tape off the back. Like that. Now, the foiling is pretty good. Like I say, it is an all-over foiling plate. And I've used quite a lot of pressure, so I might be able to, I say might, reposition the foiling plate. You might be able to feel where it goes. And if you can foil again, and you'll end up with a super shiny result. But I think that's come out quite well, so I'm not going to risk it. Okay, so there's that. As I say, I'll do a follow-on video how we turn it into the framed card. Okay, thank you for watching this part. You could of course do this with stamps and make a scene, and then perhaps the other video would also be of interest. Okay, thanks for watching.